Section 1. The Gathering Storm, Seeds of a Global Conflict. In just 6 minutes, more people died in the atomic blast at Hiroshima than were killed on D-Day, a stark and terrifying measure of the war's technological escalation. World War II was not a sudden cataclysm, but the culmination of festering wounds and aggressive ambitions left unresolved by the previous global conflict. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, imposed punitive terms on Germany, creating deep national resentment and economic instability. This humiliation provided fertile ground for extremist ideologies. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party exploited that anger, promising to restore Germany's pride and territory, setting the stage to redraw the map of the world. The timeline of aggression began long before Poland. In the 1930s, the world watched with apprehension and appeasement. Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931. Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935. Germany reoccupied the Rhineland in 1936. Germany annexed Austria in the Anschluss of 1938. The League of Nations offered only protest, emboldening dictators. Appeasement at Munich in 1938 was a desperate gamble that failed, signaling to Hitler the West lacked the will to fight. Hostilities began on September 1, 1939, when Germany launched blitzkrieg against Poland. A Soviet invasion from the east coordinated to shatter Polish defenses within weeks. Britain and France, honoring their pledge, declared war on Germany. The West entered the phony war, a deceptive lull. This lull was shattered in spring 1940 as Germany launched a stunning campaign, overrunning Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. Then France fell with shocking rapidity. With France fallen, Great Britain, led by Winston Churchill, stood almost alone. British soldiers evacuated from Dunkirk in a desperate armada of hope. The Battle of Britain raged through summer and autumn of 1940. The RAF defended the island against the Luftwaffe's relentless bombing. That victory prevented invasion and kept Britain as a vital Allied base. By 1941, the war had spread into North Africa, the Balkans, and most fatefully eastward. Hitler broke his pact with Stalin and invaded the Soviet Union in June, opening the bloodiest front in human history. Section 2. The Crucible of Combat, Turning Points and Theaters of War. The year 1941 marked the war's transformation into a truly global phenomenon. On December 7th, the Empire of Japan executed a surprise attack on the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, seeking to cripple the American Pacific Fleet and secure expansionist ambitions in Southeast Asia. This act of aggression, described by President Franklin D. Roosevelt as a date which will live in infamy, immediately brought the industrial and military might of the United States into the war. The conflict was now fought between the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the Grand Alliance, Great Britain, the Soviet Union, the United States. Vast and distinct theaters of war now raged simultaneously across the globe. The years 1942 and 1943 proved to be the conflict's critical turning point. On the Eastern Front, the gargantuan struggle for Stalingrad became a symbol of brutal, attritional warfare. After months of savage, house-to-house fighting, the German Sixth Army was encircled and annihilated by the Red Army in February 1943. This catastrophic defeat marked the beginning of Germany's long retreat from the Soviet Union. In the Pacific, the United States Navy achieved a stunning victory at Midway in June 1942. The U.S. sank 4 Japanese aircraft carriers. Midway permanently halted Japan's eastward advance. Simultaneously, major battles reshaped the war in North Africa and the Atlantic. At the Second Battle of El Alamein in late 1942, British and Commonwealth forces under General Bernard Montgomery decisively defeated Rommel's Afrika Korps, ending the Axis threat to Egypt and the Suez Canal. This victory was complemented by Operation Torch, the Anglo-American invasion of French North Africa, which caught remaining Axis forces in a pincer. In the Atlantic, German U-boats threatened to sever Britain's vital supply lines, but improved technology, intelligence, and tactics turned the tide, ensuring men and materiel could cross for the eventual invasion of Europe. By 1944, the Allies prepared to open the Second Front. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, Allied forces landed on the beaches of Normandy. Despite ferocious resistance and heavy casualties, they secured a beachhead, pouring troops and supplies into France. Operation Overlord marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. As the Western Allies pushed through France and the Low Countries, the Soviet Union advanced relentlessly from the east, squeezing the Third Reich in an inescapable vice and setting the stage for the final, brutal endgame in Europe. Section 3, The Human Cost, a world engulfed in suffering. The sheer scale of human suffering during World War II is almost impossible to comprehend, extending far beyond the soldiers on the front lines. An estimated 70 to 85 million people perished, the majority of whom were civilians. They died in bombed-out cities, during brutal occupations, from starvation, disease, and as victims of systematic extermination. London, Coventry, Dresden, Tokyo were reduced to rubble by strategic bombing campaigns that aimed to destroy enemy morale and industrial capacity. For millions, daily life was a desperate struggle for survival. Homes were destroyed, families were torn apart. The basic necessities of life became unobtainable luxuries in a world consumed by violence and deprivation. Beyond battlefield casualties, the war unleashed unprecedented atrocities against civilians. The Holocaust stands as one of history's darkest chapters, a state-sponsored industrial-scale genocide in which the Nazi regime and collaborators murdered approximately 6 million European Jews. Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor. Men, women, and children were gassed, shot, starved, and worked to death. Roma, Poles, and other Slavic peoples, Soviet prisoners of war, political dissidents, homosexuals, people with disabilities. A campaign of unimaginable cruelty that scarred humanity's conscience. The human cost was not confined to Europe. In Asia, the Imperial Japanese Army committed widespread and horrific war crimes. The rape of Nanking in 1937 saw the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians and unarmed soldiers. Forced labor, massacres, brutal medical experiments. Unit 731. Allied prisoners of war endured barbaric conditions, starvation, disease, and abuse, exemplified by the Bataan Death March. For countless millions across Asia, the war brought terror and exploitation under the guise of a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. The end of the war did not end the suffering. Europe was a continent of ruins, its infrastructure shattered, its economies destroyed. Millions of displaced persons, refugees, liberated POWs, concentration camp survivors, wandered scarred landscapes seeking home or a new life. The psychological trauma lingered for generations, affecting survivors, families, and communities alike. The toll was measured not just in lives and cities lost, but in the deep wounds inflicted upon the human spirit, a price societies would continue to pay for decades. Section 4. A New Dawn's Heavy Price, Legacies and Lessons. 1945 brought the conflict to its violent conclusion. In Europe, Allied armies closed in from the west, and Soviet armies from the east. The Red Army fought into the heart of Berlin in late April. Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker. On May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day, Germany unconditionally surrendered. The fighting, however, continued to rage in the Pacific. Despite devastating firebombing campaigns, Japan refused to surrender. The United States chose to use a newly developed atomic weapon to force a conclusion. On August 6, 1945, an atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. 3 days later, on August 9th, a second bomb fell on Nagasaki. The unprecedented destruction compelled Emperor Hirohito to intervene. On September 2, 1945, Japan formally surrendered aboard the USS Missouri. The world that emerged was fundamentally changed. Old European empires were shattered. A new order was dominated by the United States and by the Soviet Union. The dawn of the atomic age cast a long shadow, initiating the decades-long Cold War. The devastated world sought mechanisms to prevent such catastrophe again. The United Nations was founded in 1945 to maintain peace and security, foster cooperation, and promote human rights. The Nuremberg trials prosecuted prominent Nazi leaders for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and crimes against peace. These efforts reflected a desire to build a more just and stable world. The lessons of World War II are somber and essential, a warning against unchecked nationalism, racial hatred, and aggressive expansionism. It underscores the fragility of peace when diplomacy fails and appeasement emboldens aggressors. Remembering the tens of millions who perished is a solemn duty. Their story is one of immense tragedy, but also of extraordinary courage and resilience. By studying this dark period, we honor their memory and reaffirm our responsibility to resolve conflicts through dialogue and uphold rights. So the specter of global war never again darkens our world.